Good morning, Mike.
Good morning. Yeah, as I said, my name's Mike Brace. I lost my sight age 10 from a firework accident, and today I'm going to talk a little bit about that, but also about how sport has had a major impact on my life and what I've been able to do.
Thank you. When you first went blind, how was the reaction of everybody and your parents? How did they react to you and help you?
The reaction initially was very strange, really. People were unfamiliar about disabilities, so they didn't know what to make of me. And they made assumptions very often. They talked about me as though I couldn't hear them as well as couldn't see them. And that initially, I think I got quite angry, really, because I said, I thought, why don't they get to know me and before they make comments? And similarly, my parents struggled really because there was very little help around for them at the time. A lot of the focus was quite rightly, I suppose, on me, but they often felt a bit left out. My mum was working and blamed herself because she was a working mum when I had my accident. So all in all, it was a difficult time for them and difficult for me as well.
Yeah, yes. And I suppose in the days that you became blind, I guess there was no sport, no talk about Paralympics or Olympics then.
That's right. That's right. There was very little sport done other than at special schools, which I got sent off to. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. How did you first start skiing? Was it by accident or did somebody suggest it to you?
I was setting up a sports club in London, and someone that was a rehabilitation worker for the blind had been to an event in Norway and came back raving about it and thought it was fantastic. So he said, would me and some friends like to try this cross-country skiing in Norway the following year? And so we thought, well, if other blind people are doing it in Norway, why shouldn't we have a go? So off we went and fell in love with the sport, really. And then they became part of the Paralympics in 1976. So I then trialed for that and got selected.
Gosh, as a trainer and sports coach myself, did you have a training program at that time? Were there training programs?
There were very poor training programs in terms of even the able-bodied national squad. But we were very lucky in that we were linked into the army, and they had a cross-country skiing program, and they had one or two people that had been involved in the cross-country skiing down in Aldershot. And so we used to travel down to Aldershot, which had the only cross-country plastic ski track in England. And so we used to travel down there and go around this plastic track with the army then training us on fitness and doing all sorts of things with us. So, and some of those then became guides when we went to eventually train in Norway as well.
Yeah, I was going to ask about the guides. You couldn't have had better training, really, from the army. Even today, we could learn a lot, couldn't we? How did you get your first guide? Was there a single one or were there others?
Well, initially, when we were training over in Norway, they were at a specific event that provided guides, and mainly from physiotherapy schools and sports colleges. And then they also had some businessmen that were doing, if you like, social support or whatever. And I was just so lucky that my first guide that I got through that process in 1977 was a businessman in Norway. And he then became a big catalyst for us in terms of recruiting guides. So his son became one of the guides and his son's friend. So all of our guides, really from 77, 78 onwards, were all Norwegians at the competitive level. We have only basically used Norwegian guides in the major competitions because they had to be good enough skiers, but also then had to be able to guide us and talk to us while they were doing it.
How difficult was it to start off, if you can go back and imagine where you were right at the beginning, actually on the ice, going down at speed with your guide in front of you? How did you feel at that time?
I think initially a mixture of emotions, obviously a slight anxiety that you were zooming off into the unknown and you were told there were no major obstacles, but that was a bit of a leap of faith. You were also quite exhilarated because you were normally having to hold someone's elbow or go behind a dog or use a stick, and suddenly you were freely moving down
Yeah.
a mountain or across the flats, and the sense of excitement was just fantastic. And you were doing something that not many people other people have been doing.
No. And what about competitions? How many competitions were coming your way at that time? And
Well,
then
initially
how did you
they
get to
yeah.
the Olympics?
Well, initially they started the first Winter Games in '76, and then obviously they started the whole program from then onwards. So I then managed to go to 9 different Paralympic Games, 6 as a competitor and 3 as a manager. And then they also introduced European Championships and also World Cup, World Championship events. So that meant we traveled quite extensively for that, quite a lot for that. And then we also then had the annual event in Norway, which became a real big annual event and was also then a selection event for forthcoming major competitions.
I understand you also like other sports too. It's not just the skiing, but what other sports did you like and did you take part in?
Yeah, I did a lot of sports. When I set up the sports club, we started really with the ones we'd done at school. So we did cricket and we play with the small football, and the rules are slightly adapted. We play five-a-side football, and again the ball rattles on the ground, and so you can hear it. We did athletics, so you're either running with a guide around a track or different throwing events and high jump and long jump. And then we started to look at other things. So things like bowls, lawn bowls, are very good sport for blind people. A lot of people, probably the biggest participation sport is bowls for blind people. I then did a bit of fishing. And then with the biathlon, we started to do more shooting. I did a bit of archery, and then I went water skiing. I'm a race walker, so I did a lot of race walking. I then did some tandem events, so I did a lot of cycling, some long distance ones. So I did where I live in Romford. I cycled from Romford to Frankfurt in Germany, and did some long distance ones in the UK, the big Brighton events or whatever. And then started to look at other things. So I did a canoeing event in the Devizes to Westminster. And so really anyone said, oh, have you ever thought about doing this? I suppose one of the most hair-raising one was parakiting. And that's where you go up on a parachute behind a boat or a car. And that was quite exciting. So yeah, so as soon as someone said, have you ever tried that? If I hadn't, I thought, well, I'll have a go.
How many of those did you do? Those sports did you do as a child?
I did as a child, probably under say the age of 16, 18. I probably did football, cricket, athletics, swimming,
Yeah.
tandem riding. Yeah, so I think probably those. And then there were a few sort of specialist things like goalball, which is a ball, a heavy medicine ball that you throw and roll along the ground. there were things like crab football and things like that we did in the special school. But those were the main ones that I did.
How many medals had you got, and how many of the competitions did you go into, or haven't you got a tally on those yet?
Not really. I've got a few trophies over the years at the Metro Games, which is still I think it's the only vision impaired athletics event. So if people want to come and watch that, it's on the 11th of June in Mile End in London. Then I got shot discus, javelin medals. I've got walking medals. I've got some skiing medals. I've got various different things over the years from the different sports. So I got 2 participation medals in the London Marathon because I've managed to run 2 London marathons. And so yeah, the medals really are the icing on the cake. It's really been the competition and testing myself really that have been the big challenges.
Yeah, and the participation with your colleagues and friends. Yes. What do you do to relax?
I like still doing basic exercise, so I go to the gym, and that relaxes me from sort of the mental stuff. You're doing something physical, then is quite relaxing. I do a bit of gardening, a bit now, just to maintenance. I don't really know much about gardening, but quite enjoy sitting out there and having the peace and quiet to do things. I do a lot of reading, various everything from books to magazines, and then I use a computer a lot, and I've got a lot of computer games that I can then play, and that keeps me occupied.
You never stand still, do you? You absolutely don't.
Exactly.
When did you have your dog? When did you first have your dog?
That was interesting. I said for many years I probably wouldn't get a dog, and then in 2010 I felt that the environment was getting a bit more difficult. So cars parked on the pavement, and phone masts being erected on the pavement, and street furniture on the pavement. So I thought, this is getting really difficult to use a white cane. So I decided to think about getting a dog, and I got my first dog, Izzy, who's still with me now. She's 13 and a half and retired. I got her in 2010, and I've got my second dog, whose name is King, K-I-N-G, and I've had him 3 years on the 1st of April.
How long does it take to train the dog from the day you have them?
Well, the training of the dogs probably is the big thing in advance, and they start being trained from about 8 to 10 weeks old by the puppy walkers, and then they stay with the puppy walkers for 15 months. Then they go off for advanced training with people to get them to do the various skills that they need to help me with, and then they are linked into their owner, and the training then can take between a week and 3 weeks every day with someone like myself, and you go out and you're testing whether they will stop at the curbs, or know when traffic's coming, etc., etc. And then you have almost like a driving test with the dog at the end of the period to see whether you're competent and confident with the dog, and the dog's confident and competent in guiding you.
Yes, that must have been quite a difficult time to know.
It was an interesting one. Yeah, it was interesting. I've been using a cane for 50 years and basically felt fairly confident and competent. And then you're trusting an animal to, take you over the roads. But having done the skiing, I think, and having been guided on a bike or running or skiing, I think the ability then to be able to transfer the trust to something else like the dog was probably less difficult, because I'd done it so many times with the guides that I had in sport.
Yes, that makes sense actually. What just a little bit frivolous, what football team do you support, if you do?
I'm a Tottenham supporter,
Okay.
have been since a child. I used to go and watch them when I was about 7 or 8, and then have had lots of contact over the years. When I lost my sight, some of the Spurs players in the 1960s came into the hospital to see me, which was fantastic. And then in the 80s, I appeared on a television program, and 2 of the top players for Spurs came on the program as well. So that was just wonderful.
That's lovely. What is your favorite thing outside skiing? If you could pick 1 or 2 things, what would you say you really like to do?
Oh,
That's got you.
yeah, it has really, because sport has been such a big part of it. So physical exercise of some description.
Yeah.
I think the advent. Many of the listeners, won't understand this, but when I grew up, there weren't any computers that blind people could use, and suddenly being able to have access to a computer and the websites and apps and everything else, that for me is still a fantastic sort of journey that I love to try new things and to help other people suddenly discover some of these things that are available that very often you don't know about. So, you've got iPhones that now talk to you. You've got a computer that can talk to you. You've got reading books that can, machines that can actually read your books out. You've got the new Echo devices that suddenly are opening up and being able to access so many things. I couldn't remember to spell something this morning, so I asked my Echo.
Oh, bless them. Has your sense of hearing become better since you became blind?
That's a very interesting one. What I usually say is that I think there are 5 senses, they say, just hearing, sight, smell, taste, and touch. And I think that because my sight then went at that early age 10, I think the other senses have got better, that have compensated perhaps for, I don't know, 5%, 10% of the loss of sight. And what I usually say is, I'm not sure my hearing's any better than someone else, but I understand what it is I'm hearing better than other people. So I usually use the description of, if 3 of people are in a room and someone drops something on the floor, one person may know it was a coin, another person might know it was a big coin, and I might be able to tell you it was a 10 pence. Because I can hear the difference between a 10 pence and a pound coin and a 5p and know what the difference is. Whereas we've all heard the same thing, but I understand what that noise is probably better.
Yes, a little bit clearer.
Yeah.
Another question that the children wanted to ask is, have you done any sports at all with animals, i.e. horse riding, etc.?
Yes, I've did some horse riding down in Devon. Ended up being a bit brash, and they wanted someone. There were 7 of us going riding. Sorry, there were 12 of us going riding, and of that 12, 6 had 5 had ridden before, and 7 of us hadn't. And they wanted someone to go with the advanced group. And I was a bit brash and said, oh, yeah, no problem. I've skied, I've been down mountains, can easily cope with a horse ride. And I must admit, it was quite tricky, because I had the lead horse and off we went, and I didn't know how to ride. And it was a bit frightening, I would say, for me. I was more frightened on the horse than initially than I was on the skis. But after a while, I loved it. I conquered my fear, as it were, rose to the challenge and loved it.
Which was the most difficult sport that you've challenged?
I think it's the skiing initially was challenging, because I then did alpine skiing as well. So you've got the speed, and that was actually quite a challenge. But it's also sometimes the event. So I did a big canoe marathon, which was probably the most exhausting thing I've ever accomplished. And also I did my first ski marathon, was very, very grueling and stuff like that. So those events stand out as the most challenging that I've ever done. But I, also probably the most proud I've ever been was when I completed those. So I would say things like that. Those two stood out. But there are not many sports that basically. I tried windsurfing and wasn't very good at that. So I did give up trying to windsurf because I couldn't work out which way the wind was and kept falling off the board. So I was pretty useless at that. Abseiling was also quite challenging when you're being safety lined down a cliff, 200-foot cliff, and you're walking backwards. And when you step over the edge, that was quite daunting. And the only saving grace was you couldn't see how far the ground was below you.
Oh, we didn't worry then. Yeah, they tell everybody not to look down.
No.
So you were at the best there.
Exactly. Exactly. And it was slightly difficult though, because the person who organised it managed to do it fairly near a main road, so you could actually hear the traffic. So for the blind, at least you could hear how high you were.
Have you ever gone a wrong way from your guide? Have you ever sort of taken a wrong route?
Oh yeah, I mean the number of guides that sometimes didn't know the left and the right, and they've said go left and you've gone left and they meant go right, so you're hurtling down the wrong direction. In some things that you're going along where they're in front of you, and suddenly there's a dip, or you're over, or you're going off at a tangent. So yes, occasionally I have, not that often, but occasionally you do come off the area that you're supposed to be on and you're away, especially on snow and ice, because you do move quite rapidly. So a mistake can actually get quite serious quite quickly.
And a question that was asked was, does the skiing guide also win a medal when you do?
They didn't when I was competing, but they do now. So if you see the runners on the summer games and the winter games, the guide of the medal winners now get a medal, because without their help and support, the athlete can't do it. So again, tandem riders, the pilot never used to get a medal, but they do now, as well as the blind stoker at the back. And the same then in the guides and in the running and in the skiing.
Yeah, well, that seems only fair, doesn't it? Really, because they are actually there.
Yeah.
Just another little flippant question. What's your favourite colour?
That's interesting, because obviously, because I'm blind, I still remember basic colours. So I can still remember the colours that I could see. But the posh names that I didn't know, the magentas or things like that, crimson, I'm not sure I knew of. So I would say, I don't know, probably red is something I'm quite remembering, because the brightness of it, and possibly yellow. So red, I would say, probably is the favourite, followed then by yellow.
Yeah, so it's difficult. You actually saw the colours before you became blind, so that's still in your head there, isn't it?
Yes.
And lastly, your favourite animal apart from a dog? Because I'm sure you love your dogs, but a favourite animal, can you a favourite?
I would say probably having had dogs and now and cats, then I would say dogs first, and then certainly probably cats. I've never really had the same links with cats. Yeah, we had cats when I was a child, and then my sister-in-law came to live with us with 2 cats, and they really took to me. I think they selected me out for special attention. I don't know whether they realized they couldn't see, but they would come and be near me and sit on my lap and want to be with me, just to let me know they were there. So the cats were pretty wonderful. And then obviously the dogs have been very special in terms of working dogs, as well as then just being that level of company.
Thank you.
Great pleasure. And thank you very much. And thank you, young people, for the questions you've been asking. They've been really, really fantastic. So thank you.
Yes.